Alright, now let's see how we can return meaningful error messages to the client. So here in the createUser method, we have annotated the request parameter with the valid annotation. That means if we pass an invalid DTO to this endpoint, this method will not get called. Under the hood, Spring will throw a method argument not valid exception. So to return meaningful error messages to the client, we have to properly handle this exception to extract the validation errors. But here's the tricky part. We cannot handle this exception inside this method because this method will not get called if we send an invalid DTO to our API. To solve this problem, we have to define an exception handler in this controller. That is a separate method for handling exceptions of type method argument not valid exception. So let's remove this from here and define a new method. So public response entity. For now, let's just return a simple string. We can call this whatever we want, like handle validation errors. Next, we should annotate this with exception handler. And as an argument, we specify the type of exception we want to handle using this method. We can handle all exceptions or exceptions of type method argument not valid exception. Next, we should give this a parameter to get access to the underlying exception. So here we add method argument not valid exception. Now, in this method, for now, let's just return response entity dot bad request and include the exception message in the body of the response. Let's restart the application and hit this endpoint one more time. All right, now look, we have a long error message, and in the middle, we have our validation errors like name is required. So the next step is to extract these validation errors and put it into a JSON object instead of returning a long string. So instead of returning a string object, we want to return an object with this structure where keys are strings and represent field names like name, and values are validation errors like name is required. Now we can create a separate DTO for this, but we can also use a map of string to string. So let's change the return type from string to map of string to string and import this. Good. Now in this method, first we create a map. So we declare a variable called errors and set it to a new hash map of string and string. Then, instead of returning the exception message, we return our errors. Now we have to do the middle part. Here we call exception dot get binding result. Now IntelliJ is suggesting the code, so let's complete it and go over it piece by piece. Get binding result gives us access to more details about the exception. From here, we can get field errors. This returns a bunch of error objects. We iterate over these errors, and then we need to add each error to our hash map. So over here, we call errors.put. We get the field name as well as the validation message. Now, let's restart the application and hit the send point. All right, look, this is much better. So we have our fields, our invalid fields, and validation error messages. So let's play with this a little bit. Let's set the name to an empty string. We get the same result if we set it to white space. Again, the same result because the not blank annotation doesn't allow empty string or white spaces. So let's pass a valid name like user1. Now the error for name is gone. Beautiful. Now let's set email to an empty string. We get the same error message. So let's pass a valid email like user1@domain.com and send the request one more time. All right, the only error remaining is the password. Now for the password, first, let's pass a short password. We get this error saying password must be between 6 to 25 characters long. So let's pass 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Send. Beautiful. Now we have this new user with the ID 7. Let's also verify that it's properly stored in our database. So here in the users table, This is user with the ID of 7, and we have the name, email, and password.